You think you know what justice looks like. You think you'd recognize a lie when it's forced into the shape of truth. But what if I told you that 5 teenagers were torn from their homes, from their innocence, and caged, based almost entirely on words that weren't even their own? This is the case of Cateresa Matthews. A 14-year-old girl with dreams, with a voice, with a family, and within weeks of her disappearance, 5 other young lives were shattered. The story winds through botched interrogations, missing evidence, courtroom drama, and the haunting silence of a community that wasn't ready to question its own assumptions, because this wasn't just about guilt or innocence.
Welcome to Dark Chronicles, where shadows hide the truth.
November 19, 1991. 14-year-old Cateresa Matthews leaves her grandmother's house in Dixmoor, Illinois. It's just past 3:30 p.m. The plan was simple: head home. Like every other afternoon, she never made it. By that evening, her mother, Cateresa Matthews, knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Cateresa. She was grounded, not the kind of kid to vanish. Teresa started searching immediately: alleys, empty lots, abandoned buildings. Flyers went up. Friends and neighbors joined in. But days turned into weeks, and the silence only grew louder. Then, on December 8th, a man walking near Interstate 57 found something in a field. It was Cateresa. She had been assaulted and left in that field, her life ended by a single gunshot wound. She was still wearing the same clothes she left in. She hadn't made it far. But the person who did this was nowhere to be found. The police recovered 3 hairs from her body. A rape kit was processed. The evidence pointed to one clear fact: a male attacker, but this was 1991. DNA testing wasn't what it is today. No match was found, so instead of waiting for science, the investigation turned to people. 11 months passed. Then came a tip from a boy named Keno Barnes. He said another teenager, Jonathan Barr, had seen Cateresa the day she disappeared, getting into a car with other boys. That tip was all it took. Police called in Jonathan Barr. He denied knowing anything, but mentioned 2 names: Robert Taylor and Robert Lee Veal. That was enough. Police brought Veal in for questioning. And after 5 hours, no parent present, no lawyer, he signed a confession. He said he wasn't alone. He named 4 others: Taylor, James Harden, Cheyenne Sharp, and Jonathan Barr, the same boy who was just interviewed. All of them were between 14 and 16 years old. Soon, 3 of the boys confessed. The confessions matched. Kind of. They all pointed fingers, but the details didn't line up. Some of the stories contradicted each other. Locations, times, who did what, it was all a patchwork of confusion. But that didn't matter. Because the police had confessions. And that was enough. Never mind that, their statements weren't recorded. None of them had lawyers. At least one had an IQ below 60, and most chilling of all, the DNA didn't match any of them. Still, the state pushed forward. The boys were charged and tried as adults. Some received sentences up to 80 years. A few got lighter terms after agreeing to testify. The justice system had done its job, or so it thought, but this story, it wasn't over. Not even close. Years passed. The boys, now men, sat in prison. But they never stopped fighting. They wrote letters. Hundreds of them. To journalists. To professors. To Innocence projects. Anyone who would listen. Eventually, someone did. Tara Thompson of the University of Chicago's Exoneration Project read their stories, and something didn't add up. She saw how the confessions clashed. She noticed the DNA had never been retested. She filed a petition. Other lawyers joined in. And finally, the state agreed to re-examine the evidence. One problem: the DNA sample from the crime scene. The police said it was missing. Months went by. Then, quietly, it turned up. Retesting confirmed what had always been true. The DNA belonged to someone else, a man named Willie Randolph. A convicted offender with a long rap sheet: armed robbery, drug charges, assault. And, most disturbingly, he had lived near Cateresa's grandmother at the time of the murder. When interviewed in prison, Randolph started talking. A little too freely. He didn't know it, but the conversation was recorded. And he confessed. In 2016, 25 years after the crime, he was charged with murder, and the Dixmoor Five? They were exonerated. The real trial, the one Cateresa's mother had waited decades for, was just beginning. By 2016, public interest was reignited. Willie Randolph, now older, grayer, and already in prison on unrelated charges, faced a trial that many thought should have happened in the 90s, but the courtroom was different this time. There were no scared teenagers facing impossible odds. No coerced confessions. No parents locked outside, this time. There was DNA. There was a recording. And there was a mother, Cateresa Matthews, sitting in the front row of every hearing, determined to be the voice her daughter no longer had. The prosecution presented its case with quiet intensity. They walked through the timeline. Showed the DNA reports. Played the prison recording. Randolph's defense tried to argue context. Said the confession wasn't admissible. That Randolph was bragging. That he was mentally unstable. That he was lying, but jurors were watching more than testimony, they were watching a pattern. A man with nearly 40 prior arrests. A man who was paroled within walking distance of Cateresa's last known location. The jury deliberated. And the city waited. The verdict didn't come with fireworks. It didn't undo what was done, but it came. Willie Randolph was found guilty. The weight of the courtroom seemed to release all at once. Cateresa Matthews wept silently. The Dixmoor Five, now free for years, still felt something like justice, even if it arrived too late to fix everything. The state of Illinois paid $40 million in compensation for the wrongful conviction, the largest settlement of its kind in state history. But that number, it didn't bring Cateresa back. It didn't return the lost years. What it did do was open a wider conversation. The Dixmoor case became a rallying cry against coerced confessions. Against juvenile interrogations without counsel. Against rushing justice to satisfy headlines. It became an example in criminal justice classrooms. A cautionary tale for prosecutors. A wake-up call for judges. Even years later, the Dixmoor Five still carry their scars. Some lost family members while imprisoned. Others struggled to re-enter a world that moved on without them. And Cateresa's mother? She still visits her daughter's grave every year. Sometimes with flowers. Sometimes with silence. Always with the memory of a girl who loved math and music. A girl who never got the life she deserved. We tell these stories not just to solve them, but to remember what happens when the system fails, and to hope that by remembering, we make it just a little harder for history to repeat. Justice delayed is still justice, but justice denied, that leaves an echo. The Dixmoor Five weren't the first. And they weren't the last. Wrongful convictions disproportionately affect black communities in America. According to data from the National Registry of Exonerations, black people make up only 13% of the U.S. population, but account for more than 50% of known exonerations. It's not a glitch. It's not coincidence. It's a pattern. From false confessions, to prosecutorial bias, to underfunded public defense, it's a system that too often turns suspicion into guilt based not on evidence, but on race, circumstance, and pressure to close a case. In Dixmoor, the five boys were barely teenagers. They didn't stand a chance. They were poor. They were scared. They were black. And that made them easy targets. Once you're inside the system, everything turns against you. The presumption of innocence erodes. Media spins a narrative. Judges lean toward convictions. And juries are swayed by the most damaging testimony of all, a confession, even a false one. Experts have studied the phenomenon of false confessions for years. The reasons range from fear, coercion, exhaustion, mental disability, to pure manipulation. Yet juries rarely question them. And prosecutors almost never walk them back. Even when DNA speaks, the legal machinery often resists. It took 2 decades and an entire legal team to undo what was done to the Dixmoor Five. And for every one of those success stories, there are countless more sitting in silence, still inside, still hoping someone will believe them. This case also opened the door for reforms. Some states now require recording of all interrogations. Some mandate legal counsel for minors. But much of the country still operates in the shadow of outdated, deeply flawed procedures. The story of Cateresa Matthews, and the 5 boys falsely accused of her death, is more than just a crime story. It's a reflection of what happens when society fails its most vulnerable, if we want a justice system that lives up to its name. It has to be built on more than fear. It has to be built on truth, transparency, and the willingness to admit when it's wrong, because sometimes, justice comes too late, and sometimes, it never comes at all.
So, that's how crimes end, and if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you want me to do some special crimes in all over the world, comment down below, or you can send us direct through email, and I will see you in all my videos. See ya!